Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and Gamefound over the next week. If you're new here, we do this every single week going over all the upcoming campaigns, and I usually do like to start these videos by going over some news and announcements that I just found out about, except I don't really have anything new to talk about in this episode, so we can pretty much just jump straight into it after I give a quick mention to Alex over at Boardgame Co, because him and I do work together keeping track of all these upcoming campaigns, and I do these every week. But if you want to see a bit more into the future and see some of the heavy hitters for each month, Alex does post a video at the start of each month going over those heavy hitters, and he also posts a ton of other follow-up content as well for active campaigns, reviews of new and old games, and he does playthroughs and also touches on all sorts of subjects in the industry. And if you do want the most comprehensive coverage, I definitely recommend following along with Zilla Blitz as well, because he covers an area that both Alex and I don't touch on in near as much detail, because he focuses more on the historical war games and simulations, and there are whole other crowdfunding platforms that are dedicated to these that I don't look at, but he will definitely have you covered. If you're interested in this, I'll have a link to both Alex's channel as well as Zilla Blitz's in the description down below. Definitely check them out and feel free to subscribe if you do like their content. And also, if you haven't subscribed to my channel and you find this content useful, feel free to subscribe here as well. I am also filming this video a little bit earlier than usual because it is Family Day weekend here in Canada, and I'm going to be going up north ice fishing with my family, which is kind of a thing that we do every year. We do have 11 games to cover this week, so unless there's a whole bunch announced tomorrow, I don't think I'm going to be missing out on too many. I just do like to mention when I am filming a little bit earlier than usual so that you can just keep in mind that there might be a few more that were announced. But with all that out of the way, let's check out the campaigns. And the first campaign we have launches on February 18th, and this one is called Meerkat Kingdoms. And this one is a competitive game where players are going to be using dice in order to place out their meerkats in order to try and control the most valuable areas to earn victory points for the end of the game. The way the game works is that each player is going to have their own personal player board where they're going to be keeping their supply of meerkats, and then the player board's also going to outline what you can do on your turn as well as any of your special actions. The main play area can be made up of a bunch of different modular tiles that can be set up in any arrangement, creating a lot of variety from game to game. But essentially on your turn, what you're going to be doing is rolling 3 dice, and then you're going to be choosing 2 of those dice to combine together, and that's going to be determining the location that you can place your meerkats. The leftover die dictates how many meerkats you're allowed to place on that location, with each of the values corresponding to a certain amount of meerkats. Each location also has 2 numbers on it, which represent the amount of victory points if you are either the player that has the most meerkats on it or the player that has the second most meerkats on it. After you've placed your meerkats, you can then take one of the special actions from the top of your board, which can grant you with all sorts of different abilities, like moving or swapping meerkats, just to name a couple. As I mentioned, players do gain victory points from controlling the various tiles at the end of each round, but you can also earn additional victory points by completing your own private objectives, and there are also different predators and different weather patterns that can manipulate your different meerkats out on the board that all the players will have to be aware of. And the final round is triggered as soon as there's only one player that still has any meerkats left, and then it's the player with the most victory points at that time that wins the game. And if you do want to check this one out, I will have it linked in the description below, and of course you can click to get notified once it launches. Also launching on the 18th, we have Coral Castle, and this one is also a competitive game, but in this game, players are trying to make the most prestigious garden underwater for all the other mermaids to see. This is a game that plays over just 3 rounds, but at the start of each round, players are going to be drafting 9 cards. During the first round, you'll be able to play 6 of those cards. During the second round, you'll be able to play 7 of them, and then the final round, you'll be able to play 8. But any of those cards that you choose not to play, you still get to hang on to, and those will be options that you'll still have available to you in the next rounds. The main thing you're trying to do with these cards is to move up various tracks, with each of the different tracks being associated with a different icon, and then each player having their own set of meeples that they're going to have on each track so that each player can identify who is the furthest. In order to move up a track, players are going to want to play cards that match the same icon as seen on that track, but some of the cards do also require you to spend pearls in order to play, while other cards might grant you pearls that you can then spend on those other cards. Each of the cards cards do also have different keywords on them, and some cards do have some special abilities that allow you to multiply the amount of actions you're going to get from any cards that you play in that same turn with a specific keyword. This means that in order to get the most out of your turn, you're going to be trying to draft cards that combo off each other really well, and this is why it's really important to keep in mind which cards you're not using for the current turn, because those will be options on a future turn, and when you're drafting, you might want to consider the cards that you already have and trying to consider your options of what might combo the best. At the end of each round, players are going to be gaining victory points based on how far they are up each of the different tracks, and then if you are able to reach the end of a track, you'll also be able to put your colored coral on the end of the board, which is also worth 10 victory points for each coral you have there at the end of the game. If this one sounds interesting to you, you can go ahead and check it out, and I will have it linked in the description down below. And also launching on the 18th, we have a new expansion for Northgard Uncharted lands, and this is called the Uncharted Horizons expansion. It's going to be adding new clans and creatures that you can just mix into the game, which is going to add even more challenges and more asymmetry between the players. But if you'd rather not play with other players, there is also a solo mode that's introduced with this, and there are going to be a few different modules that you can just mix and match into the game however you like. If you're not familiar with the original game, this is a Viking-themed 4X game, which is based on the Northgard video game. This is a game that features deck building, dice rolling, variable player powers, as well as a modular board that does get built as you play. Players are going to be gaining victory points by exploring the different areas, fighting each other, and controlling different territories. In order to do all this, players are going to be playing cards to take their actions, and all the players do start with the same identical base deck, but more cards can be added based on whichever clan that you're playing as, and players are going to be adding a new card into their hand at the end of each turn, but it's the player who passes first that's going to get first choice amongst the cards. The different icons on the cards indicate the different types of actions that they grant you, and some of these actions can allow you to add new tiles onto the board, add units onto the board, or move those units around, and you're going to be triggering a combat anytime that you have units in a location with an opposing player. Whenever this happens, each player is going to be rolling a die, and there's different outcomes that you can roll that can either add strength to your side or just straight up kill opposing units. Killed units are immediately removed from the board, but it's the most strength that's going to be winning the battle, and then any other remaining units from the losing side are just going to have to retreat to an adjacent location. These little hammers grant you with a build action, which allows you to build your different buildings out on areas that you control, which will grant you with bonuses in those locations. There's also cards that grant you with different resources, and there's apples which are required to feed your units at the end of each round, but you can also spend the apples during a battle in order to increase your overall strength. The other main resource is the wood resource, which is spent in order to build those various buildings, but then there's also cards that you can acquire that have some special abilities or unique effects whenever you use them, and these effects will just be outlined on the card. The game comes to an end after 7 rounds, or when a player controls 3 regions that each also have their largest buildings in them. If that's the case, then that player wins the game. Otherwise, it's the player with the most points after those 7 rounds. And if you do want to check this one out, I will have it linked down below. Also launching on the 18th, we have City of Venus Survivors. And this one is a competitive game where each player has crash landed on the surface of Venus. And players are going to be rolling dice to try and locate survivors, explore and gather materials, and try to power their ship to get launched back off the planet's surface. This game is also my own personal pick of the week, and I do have a few reasons for that, with the first one being that this one does feature a lot of simultaneous play, which is going to allow you to always be taking actions and just make the game move along that much quicker. Secondly, this game features a sort of dice worker placement mechanism, which is always a mechanism that I really do like, and I think this game does it particularly well with the amount of options that it gives you, because you'll be rolling those dice to try to create different sets, and depending on the sets that you get, you'll be able to place those dice on your own personal player board in order to unlock access to different actions or resources. But because you can often make multiple sets with the dice that you roll, or you might even unlock different powers that allow you to re-roll or manipulate your dice, which is just going to give you a whole bunch of flexibility with your dice since you're combining them together in order to take your actions, which is a lot different from a lot of other dice worker placement games where usually you're placing the dice individually, which is almost always a lot more limiting. But this game plays over a series of rounds where each player is going to be simultaneously rolling their dice and then creating sets with those dice in order to take those actions, and the different actions can allow you to gain different polyominoes of different sizes that you'll be able to place out on your various boards, or they can gain you resources which can be common resources which you can spend to bump up or down a pip on any of your dice, or there's rarer ones that can actually be spent to grant you temporary dice. There's also actions that can grant you some one-time use ability cards, and then there is the most difficult action to unlock, which is to get 5 dice of the same value, which will grant you fuel for your ship, and the first player that's able to get 5 of these is going to be triggering the final round of the game. All the different combinations of dice and their associated actions are all outlined on each of the player's player boards, and some of these combinations are easier to get than others. For example, this top left location only requires 3 dice. It doesn't matter what their values are, you're just going to have to sacrifice those 3 dice to take that action. And there is also a location here that just requires 1 of any die, which is really nice if you do have a die left over. Some of the more difficult locations might require you to get sequential runs of dice or dice of the same value, but what's really nice about these is that you can get a different action unlocked depending on how many dice you can create in that set. So for example, if you're able to get 3 dice of the same value, that's going to be getting you a different action than if you're able to get 4 or 5 dice of the same value. There is also a location if you're able to get a full house, so that would mean 3 dice of the same value and 2 dice of a different value. And then there are also these other locations where you can actually sacrifice dice in order to modify the pip of another die. So you can already see how there's a ton of different ways that you can spend your dice, but you're only going to have more options as you get more of those one-time use cards or those different resources that allow you to manipulate your dice even more. But there are also some permanent abilities that you can get, so you can actually build up a bit of an engine. And the way that you get these is by placing out those polyomino tiles, because any location that you cover up, you're going to be gaining the resource at that location, and some of those locations have survivors from your ship, and you'll be able to take that survivor and then gain a engineer card, which you're going to be putting onto your board and then assigning that survivor to that card in order to indicate that it's activated. These cards give you abilities that you can use once per turn. Another thing to note about these different tiles that you're going to be covering up with polyominoes is that all players do start with one of them at the beginning of the game, and if you're able to completely fill up a tile, that is another way that you can get fuel for your ship. But if you decide to place a polyomino that goes off any edge of the tile, that will allow you to add a new tile to that board, extending the different options that you have and also granting you with new opportunities. This gives players options if they want to prioritize saving more of those engineers, or if they want to try and go for more of those fuel rods. As I mentioned, those fuel rods are really important because the first player to get 5 of them at the top of their board is going to be triggering the final round in the game. And what's really cool about this part of the game is that the rest of the game played simultaneously, but the final round plays with players going one at a time. Whichever player's turn it is, they're going to be rolling their dice, but then also adding a bonus die equal to the number of fuel rods that they were able to acquire at this point in the game. What you're trying to do at this point is roll the most dice of the same value, because it's whichever player that's able to do that that does win the game, and if there's a tie, it's the player that rolls the highest value that's going to win. And I really do like how this works and how it's very different from other games, and it's not about victory points or anything like that to win the game, and just because you're the player that triggered the end of the game, it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll win, because there is an element of chance here. But if you did trigger the end, and if you do have those 5 extra bonus dice added to your pool, you do have much better odds. But it's not all about the dice, because it's also about all the different special actions and abilities that you're able to acquire and unlock throughout the game that are also going to help you with this final round. Since all the players are doing this at one at a time at the end of the game, this also creates a nice little spectacle where everyone's very interested in what the other players are doing, and it'll definitely be creating some tension as players are trying to outdo the rules of the other players, even if they don't have quite as much to work with. I think this one looks like a lot of fun, and if you do too, you can go ahead and check it out down below. And don't forget that you can click that notify me on launch button in order to get notified once this one launches. Also on the 18th, we have Spokes, and this one is an abstract bicycle racing game where players are competing to be the first player to complete 3 laps. The way this game works is that each player is going to have a board with these different colored blocks which represent different spokes in a tire. Players are going to be starting the game with one of each color, but then you also have this small cube here that you're going to be using to track the rotation of your tire. The main board is also going to feature a whole bunch of these wooden blocks that you're just going to be dumping out on the board and then pushing into the various grooves in the board. This is a turn-based game that's really easy to teach and play because on your turn you're just going to be rotating the cube up to 3 spaces counterclockwise on your board and then swapping the last spoke that you just moved over with one of the spokes out on the board. You'll then be able to move your player token as far as you want along any connected spokes, matching that same color that you just removed from your board. And that's pretty much all there is to it, other than if another player is in the location that you were just about to move into, then you'll be able to flip this card beside your board to indicate that you now have the slipstream ability. This can be spent on a future turn to allow you to move down an extra spoke of any color. The first player to complete 3 laps wins the game, and if you do want to check this one out, I will have it linked down below. Also launching on the 18th, we have Tales of Myth and Legend, and this one is a competitive narrative game where players are going to be playing as different heroes in ancient Greece, competing against each other as well as Alexander the Great in order to become the next leader of Greece. All the while, players are going to be challenged by different creatures from Greek mythology, and the way this game plays is that each round players are going to be simultaneously playing a movement card that determines how far they're going to be able to travel as well as their turn order for this round. In that turn order, players are going to be spending their movement to move to different city locations where they're each going to have an encounter there. These encounters might require a certain amount of political, religious, or military influence in order to overcome, and the encounter will be read aloud to the player by someone else, and they're going to have to make different choices about how they want to proceed. As players are doing this, Alexander the Great's influence is also going to be spreading across the map, and players can try to challenge him in order to gain really nice rewards, but this can also be very dangerous. Depending on the decisions of the players and the successes and failures, there's going to be different hidden components that will then be revealed and added into the game, and there's thousands of different stories and encounters that players can uncover, which does make this a game that you can continue to play over and over. Unfortunately, I don't have a whole lot more info on this one, and there isn't very many pictures on their campaign page, so if you do want to check this one out in more detail, definitely go ahead and check it out, and I will have it linked down below. Also launching on February 18th, we have the next campaign being offered from Inside Up Games, and this one's actually going to be offering 3 different games that all play very different from each other, and the first one is called Crits and Tricks, and this one is, of course, a trick-taking game, but what makes this one very different from any other trick-taking game that I've ever seen is that the lead suit is going to be determining the win condition for that trick, and it's also going to be determining the special abilities available to the players. Players are going to be playing cards from their hand while also rolling polyhedral dice based on the card's abilities in order to try and get the most strength and try to complete different objectives in order to gain loot, because this is a game that plays over just 3 rounds, and the player with the most loot after those 3 rounds is going to be the winner of the game. And next we have Tug of Roar, and this one is a game where players are going to be bidding for cards and then placing them out on different locations in order to have the most strength and gain the points of that location. The way the game works is that, like I said, players are going to be bidding for cards, but then players are going to be taking turns playing those cards into the different locations on their side of the board. These cards can gain you strength, but they can also activate different abilities that can manipulate the board in various ways. You're going to be trying to take advantage of all of this in order to get the most strength in the most locations, because whichever player is able to do that wins the game. And finally, we have Thieves of Eldris, and this one is a game where players are going to be rolling dice, and then each player is also going to have a hidden identity out on a tableau of cards. Players are going to be using those dice that they've rolled in order to manipulate the cards, swap them around in various ways, and also trigger different abilities. Players are going to be trying to do all this to move their character adjacent to different locations and townsfolk in order to gain coins by stealing from the characters around them. The first player to gain 8 coins wins the game, and if you do want to learn more about any of these or check out the campaign, I will have it linked down below. Also launching on the 18th, we have Don't Look Back, and this one is a cooperative miniatures horror game where each player is going to be playing as their own asymmetrical character. And if you just look at this one, you can see that it does take some inspiration from miniatures war games, and this one does use a measuring stick in order to facilitate movement and various other actions in the game. But players are going to be working together to fight back against a killer in various environments, but what makes this game so interesting is that it actually features dynamic dynamic, randomly generated rules. This means that every time you play the game, you're going to be getting a completely new randomly generated killer, which is going to have different mixes of traits, strengths, and weaknesses that players will have to adapt to. The game does come with some pre-made scenarios that allow players to just jump in and play, but this was designed to also be a sandbox for the players, and if you are interested in creating your own scenarios, there are ways that you can do that. If all that sounds interesting to you, you can go ahead and check this one out, and I will have it linked down below. Also launching on the 18th, we have a new campaign for the game Star Trek Ascendancy, and this one is called The Final Frontier. This is going to be offering a big box solution which fits the core game as well as every expansion and everything released for the game so far, as well as the new content that this Final Frontier expansion is going to be adding. This includes 3 new playable civilizations with the Gorn, the Tholian, and the Terran Empire, but what I think is the biggest addition with this new version of the game is that it's going to be including a brand new playable campaign and an updated and modified rulebook. And yes, it does include some balances and changes. If you're not already familiar with this game, this is a 4X game where players are going to be playing as different asymmetrical civilizations. You're going to be trying to win the game by occupying all your opponent's homeworlds or by gaining 5 Ascendancy, which can be purchased by gathering certain resources throughout the game. At the start of the game, players all start on their home planets, and then on a turn you're going to be going through a build phase where players are going to be researching new technologies, upgrading their ships, building new ships, or building production nodes on planets that they control in order to generate resources that match those colors. Players then move into an action phase where they're going to be spending their command tokens in order to perform various actions, and the actions can allow you to assign ships to various fleets, warp those fleets to new locations where you're also going to be drawing an event card and resolving. And of course, there are actions that allow you to attack other civilizations or even try to take over their planets, which is all resolved through a sequence of dice rolling. After all players have taken their actions, you're then going to be moving into the final phase where you're going to be generating resources at any of the nodes that you have on planets that you control, which can then be spent on future turns to give you more flexibility with your actions, allowing you to build more ships, gain more command tokens, or build more nodes out on the various planets. As I mentioned, some of these resources can also be spent to gain Ascendancy, which is one of the endgame triggers. So if a player is able to do that, or if a player is able to occupy all the other opponents' homeworlds, then they're going to be the ones to win the game. And if you are interested to learn more about this and what all the expansions have to offer, you can go ahead and check it out, and I will have it linked in the description down below. Also on February 18th, we have CATAN, the Masterpiece series, and this is not a new version of the game, but instead it's going to be offering you new licensed upgraded components for that original game. It looks like this is going to offer a whole bunch of options depending on how you want to upgrade your game and what you want it to look and feel like, but it looks like pretty much every component is going to be offered in some sort of upgraded form. There's going to be some custom sharp-edged dice, little boats they can use to represent the different harbors, tiles for all the different types of terrain, and it looks like there's going to be a recessed area in the center here where you're going to be able to put in whatever number gets assigned to that location. Different options for the robbers, different options for the buildings, including this ancient civilizations modification, wooden sea harbor boards that you can put around the perimeter of the game, and it looks like there's going to be some new things added after the campaign starts. So if you do want to check out everything that this campaign entails, you will have to follow along and see what new things do get added. If you're interested in that, you can go ahead and click the link down below, and if you do follow along now, you'll also get a free pin added to your pledge if you do decide to back this one. And launching on February 19th, we have Champions of Wind and Fire, and this one is a competitive game where players are going to be training their dragons in order to try and win 5 different challenges in a tournament in order to score the most victory points at the end of the game. These 5 different challenges are going to be chosen by the players at the start of the game. You're going to be resolving one of them at the end of each round. Something that's really neat about this game is that it does feature an I split you choose mechanism, where at the start of every round there's always going to be an active player, and then that player is going to be taking all the dice, rolling them, and then splitting them into separate groups however they like, so that each player can draft a set of dice with the person that rolled going last. The different dice will feature different icons on them, which can be spent in 2 different ways. You can either spend the die to get matching tiles that you're going to be placing onto your board, with each row on the board being restricted to a certain colored tile. The whole purpose of this is that you're trying to create different patterns on your board that you can then spend in order to upgrade your dragon by matching matching the patterns on the different tiles that make up your dragon. Whenever you do this, the tiles that you spent still remain on your board, but you're going to be flipping them to the other side, which means that the more upgrades you do, the less space you're going to have left on your board in order to do future upgrades. This means that you really have to consider which tiles and where you're spending out on your board so that you don't put yourself in a corner. But the other option you have when spending your dice is that you can spend it on the location below your dragon, because there's going to be a bunch of these different recessed locations that all start the game with a gem in them, and if you haven't already taken the gem from that location, you can spend one of your dice that matches the location under the gem in order to gain that gem, but then also activate one of the special abilities located around that location. These can gain you one-time use cards, abilities to remove some of your used tiles from your board, or even grant you with different resources that can boost your dragon's power. But like I said, you can only do this if you haven't already taken the gem, so if you have, then you're not able to do this. And also it is possible that you don't have any space left on your board for a particular color, so if you end up with a die that you're not able to use on either of these boards, then that is going to come with a negative consequence. And you're going to be gaining a black crystal each time that happens, which you're going to have to assign to one of the 3 locations on your dragon, and it's going to be reducing the power of that specific location. This is of course something you want to avoid, because you're going to need to have as much strength as possible in order to try and come out on top in the tournament phase, because at the end of each round you're going to be resolving the next tournament card at the bottom of the board, and these are going to be depicting a body part of the dragon as well as a color. Each player then calculates the strength of their dragon by looking at the tile depicting that specific body part, adding any strength from any modifiers, and then removing any strength from those black crystals. The color of the card represents the color of the crystals that you can use to increase the strength of your dragon. The way this works is that each player is going to have this little wheel here, and you're going to be bidding in secret the amount of crystals that you want to add onto your dragon. This adds a little bit of push your luck, where you might want to spend less now so that you have more of those gems left in the future. But after all players have made their bids and you've calculated the final strength of your dragon, the players that came in first and second are going to be gaining victory points, with of course the person in first gaining the most victory points. This continues for the 5 rounds until all those challenge cards are completed. Then the player with the most overall victory points is the one that wins the game, and if you do want to check this one out, I will have it linked down below. And that's all we got for this week, but don't leave yet, because we still got a few awesome giveaways to announce. And the first one we have is for a pledge for StarDriven Gateway. And this one is a competitive game where players are going to be exploring the galaxy, finding different anomalies, and creating their crew in order to operate their ship. What's really cool about this game is that in order to activate a part of your ship, you do need to have a crew assigned to that location. But then each round you're going to be rolling dice and then assigning those dice to those various locations in order to power them up. These of course are going to help you with your various actions throughout a round, and players will be playing over those rounds to try and collect the most victory points in order to win the game. And this giveaway is going to be for a deluxe edition of the game, and all you got to do to enter this is leave a comment down below with the hashtag Gateway, and you can say anything that you want, but if you're looking for something in particular, maybe you could let us know if you were hired onto a spaceship, which role would you want to have on that ship? This might sound a little ambitious, but I think I would prefer to be the captain. If someone's going to be making decisions on the ship that can put my life in danger, I want to be the one to make them. Also, I do have a lot of experience managing people and projects and making tough decisions, so I think I do a pretty good job. One important thing to note with this giveaway is that it is only offering free shipping to the US, so if you are anywhere else in the world, you still can feel free to enter this one. Just keep in mind that you will probably have to cover the shipping. And the next giveaway we have is for a pledge for Granfondo, and this one is a competitive bicycle racing game. But what's really neat about this one is that it does use a sort of trick-taking element in order for players to move around on the board, with each of the cards featuring a different terrain and a different value. Each player is actually going to have 3 different bicyclists that they're going to be controlling out on the board, and each bicyclist can be proficient in one of 3 different areas, either in sprinting, long-distance runs, or in mountainous terrain. This game does also feature some push your luck elements where players can also take shortcuts or cheat in various ways, but this does come with a risk that could end up hurting you more than it helps. And this giveaway is for the winner pledge, and to enter this giveaway, all you gotta do is leave a comment down below with the hashtag winner, And you can say anything that you want, but if you are looking for something in particular, maybe let us know what your favorite non-motorized way to travel is. For myself, I actually used to mountain bike, and I used to longboard, and I used to skateboard, but I just ended up hurting myself way too much, so I don't really do any of that anymore. Skiing is probably pretty top of my list for modes of travel without a motor, but I still do hurt myself. But I think my favorite mode of travel is in a kayak with a fishing rod. And the last giveaway we have is for a pledge for pizza rolls, and this one is a really fun little card game that I've actually played several times now, and I really do like this one. And what I do really like about this is that this is a hidden roll game, but players aren't trying to guess what the other players are, they're just trying to figure out what the other players like and possibly don't like. Because depending on your hidden roll, you're going to have different toppings on a pizza that you either want or don't want in order to score victory points. And players start with a hand of cards, and those are all the cards you get throughout the entirety of the game. Players will be playing those cards to either move toppings on or off the pizza, or even to flip those cards in order to multiply the impact they have by 2. There's also some special cards players can get that do have some unique effects. But this game has a really neat end game condition, because any turn that you have, you can always choose to pass, and any time that the majority of players pass in a row, that's going to be instantly ending the game. That means if there's 5 players and 3 players pass in a row, then that's going to be ending the game. But passing does not take you out of the game, it just means that you're not going to be playing a card that round, and if 2 players pass and then the 3rd player doesn't, then that does not end the game, and then the turns just continue as normal. The game offers competitive and cooperative modes to play, and in order to win you just have to get a single point, but of course whoever gets the most points is just a little bit more of a winner than the rest. And this is another giveaway that's only going to be offered in the US, but I'm also going to be running this one over on the Discord, which you can go ahead and find in the description down below. All you got to do is head over to the giveaways channel, click the emoji underneath that giveaway, and this will be automatically drawn at the end of the week. If you haven't checked out the Discord yet, it is really cool. We have all the upcoming campaigns listed out here in order of their launch date. So all the games I just talked about you can see here in the coming next week category, but you can also scroll down to see what's remaining in the month and what's coming next month. I keep no secrets, everything is on here, so check it out if you do want to see a bit more into the future. Good luck in the giveaways, but now let's go ahead and draw the winners from last week's giveaways, and we had a pledge for the All Play campaign and the 3 games included here, as well as a pledge for dice fights, heal or steal. And we're going to be drawing for the all play games first, so to draw those I'll be using this fancy application here. All these extra names down here are bonus entries for my members over on Ko-fi who help make all of this possible. If you do appreciate this content, you want to make all these efforts a little bit more sustainable for me, I really do appreciate it. You can find a link to my Ko-fi in the description down below. Let's go ahead and draw those comments and draw a winner. And the winner for the All Play pledge is Southstar, who is a member from Ko-fi, so congratulations on the win here. Feel free to email me at adam@shelfclearer.com and we'll get that pledge all sorted out. Now let's go and grab the winner for dice fights, and for this one we just had to put in the hashtag dice. So let's grab those comments and draw the winner. And the winner is Gary Britson, also from Ko-fi. Congrats on the win. Just email me at adam@shelfclearer.com and we'll get that sorted out. And I know I've mentioned again and again that I will be making some changes to these giveaways so that the comments section does have more opportunities to win. The way I plan to do that is by allowing the Ko-fi members to opt into giveaways instead of me just putting all of the entries in. I'm pretty confident that that change will balance the giveaways to make sure that it is more of a 50-50 split. But in order for me to make that change, I need to get some other high priority items off my to-do list so that I can spend some time on this one. And I do have some other ideas with the channel that I'd like to try out as well, so these changes will be coming. I just can't promise when exactly that'll be. But that's everything I have for you this week, and I hope you have yourself a fantastic week. And if you are a fan of hockey, the second Four Nations face-off game just ended as I was recording this video, and USA did beat Finland by quite a bit of points. And Finland did play really, really well at the beginning of the game here. They even got the first goal, but the USA team is pretty stacked, so they are definitely a tough team to beat. I'm really interested to see how they fare against Canada. Canada did just beat Sweden yesterday, but it was a tied game and it did go into overtime, so it's really hard to say which team is going to be coming out on top here, but these are all really excellent teams with some of the best players in the NHL. So if you want to see some super teams face off, there's going to be a lot more games to come in this round robin. As always, thanks so much for tuning in. I do appreciate it. And until next time, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.